to close all these reflections that we have been sharing during the weekend, I want to focus on a point that Doug touched upon, and I think is quite important, and we don't discuss too frequently. I think everything that we are experiencing in the world today is part of what we may call the birth pangs of a new civilization. I think we can see that all this conflict and polarization is because humanity, or people, there is a group of people that are beginning to say, I want to live in a different way, not the way that we were living. I want to have different values. And that naturally clashes with all the people that say, why? You know, we were okay living in this way. And then you have these two forces of people who don't see the need for a change or are afraid of it, or in some cases because the status quo is good for them because they are the ones that are benefited by it. But I see that there is a lot of waking up to certain things that people feel are not fair, are not right. And this is in line with what Blavatsky and other theosophical leaders said. Because Blavatsky wrote that there is a new civilization gradually forming, as we saw in one of the quotes. We are still in the embryonic stage of this civilization, and it will take, according to Annie Besant and Leadbeater, it will take about 700 years for that civilization to become relevant and to be looked up to. And because obviously in humanity, all these changes are very slow. But Blavatsky said the change is beginning already when she was writing. So part of the work of the Theosophical Society, we have been told, is about helping to shape the coming civilization. So Annie Besant said, for example, the immediate future, and by immediate, 700 years from a cosmic point of view is quite immediate. And actually, if you see in the theosophical view, if you are a spiritual person, the time that you take between incarnations can very easily be 1,000 years or even more. So 700 years is your next incarnation and kind of, waking you up earlier and say, okay, come that we need you. But actually, as we are going to see, for those who want to participate in this project, there is the possibility of immediate repeated incarnations to help with this work. So anyway, Annie Besant says, the immediate future of the Theosophical Society is the work of building that next subrace which is to come. In the past, the different subraces were more based on a particular culture, but something that Blavatsky and Besant and Leadbeater said about this sixth subrace is that it will be very much multinational, multi-ethnic, that the sixth subrace is not in one particular location, but it's something that is happening around the world. There are some focal points, but this is something that because of, in the past there wasn't this possibility of interconnection that exists today. So when a change began, it always began localized somewhere. Today, that is not a need any longer because we are one world. So accordingly, this new civilization is going to spring from any part of the world. So the immediate future of the TS is the work of building that next subrace which is to come. That is the work for which consciously the Theosophical Society ought to be working now. And in proportion as each one of you members realize it, so will be the strength of your labor. In proportion as you understand it, you understand what this means, so should be your share in the gladder work of that happier time. You know, I'm repeating a quote that Doug shared today as an introduction. For the future of the Theosophical Society is to be the mother and even the educator of the child sex subrace, which already is going through its antenatal life or natal life. So what does it mean? Besant says, consider what the sex subrace is to be, and in that we shall realize the work and the future of the Theosophical Society. So she says the note of the next civilization will be brotherhood. Under whatever name, you know, this happens. What this means is that, as you are going to see, just as today our civilization flourishes based on individualism, the next civilization will be based on brotherhood, kinship, you know, cooperation. We'll see all of that. So that brotherhood is the dominant note of the coming day. And because we have taken that as our first object, and this is not by coincidence, you see in the Mahatma letters that the masters were constantly emphasizing what we want is a universal brotherhood of humanity. And then people, the early members said, okay, but tell me about these occult forces, tell me about how to develop these powers. And the master would say, sure, we can give you this, but this is so that you can form a universal brotherhood. And they had to repeat it several times. So Besant says, because we have taken that as our first object, we have a right to call ourselves a nucleus of that civilization. And before we definitely recognize the value and the need of that brotherhood, we can consciously cooperate with nature. Now, when you see all these statements, this is not like being the chosen people. You know, the Theosophical Society was founded with this particular aim, but it is up to us if we are going to be helpful or not in this. We can be completely forgotten if we are not helpful for these plans. So when you say that Besant says, you know, we can say that we are a nucleus of that civilization, provided that we are working in this way. You know, if we don't do our work, there are plenty of possibilities of replacing the Theosophical Society. And of course, we don't need to think that only us are working in this. So it's evident that not only us are working on this, although there are not so many as I personally would like to. But anyway, when you see these statements, they are all conditional statements. So that is the real strength of our movement, not our numbers, they are comparatively small, but our conscious working with the forces that make for the future. So she said several times here, what can make us, in theory, you know, different, let's say, I don't like the word, but it's that theoretically we know that we are working for this. We should be working consciously for this. If we don't, then we are just like any other movement in the world. We may unconsciously be moving in that direction. Semi-consciously, we realize, yes, tolerance is good, and we may, you know, more or less move in that direction while pursuing many other things. But what Annie Besant says here, we have an opportunity because we can be completely conscious of what we are doing. And what Janet said in her talk when she was talking about Arya Samaj, this Hindu society that the masters were trying to work through to influence in Hinduism, and there was this person that was their disciple, and then finally they had to drop that person as a disciple. And the main problem is that he became sectarian, basically. And that in the Mahatma letters you see a lot of this. Oh, this is a great person, but we cannot use that person because that person is sectarian. These are people who live very pure lives, but we cannot use those people because they are not focused on helping humanity. There are these other people who are great intellects, but we cannot use them because they apply their intellect to worldly things. So when they set up the Theosophical Society, they set it up with certain conditions that are required for that particular piece of work to help this new way of living and relating to each other. And to the extent that we can work on those lines, we can be helpful, or otherwise they may even need to generate another organization, the masters, I mean. So let's see a little more about what are the qualities, what are said to be the qualities of this new movement. So the dawning of a civilization where unity shall be the keystone instead of strife, unity instead of strife. So if we as an organization want to start leading the way in this, or let's not put it in terms that can feed the ego, if we want to cooperate with this is one of our mandates. Can we become a place to experiment how we can work together, being all different, having freedom of thought? So Doug says, we should do this, and we say, who are you? Well, I'm the president of the TS, but everybody can think whatever they want. So it would be far easier if Doug can say, let us do this, and we all say, okay, we'll do that. So we are in an organization that is very difficult to have cohesion, but that freedom of thought is essential for the next civilization. Annie Besant many times said, the intuition can only flourish when there is freedom of thought. When there is fundamentalism, you can get great devotion, you can get great drive, but you cannot get the spiritual intuition. The spiritual intuition needs freedom of thought. And that makes us very often an inefficient organization. If we were to say, you know what, everybody, now we are going to do this, and everybody in the world is doing the same thing, we would be far more efficient. But we would be moving away from what is needed for the next civilization. And this is a hard work. That's why I really think that's why we struggle so much. I mean, we can ask Doug to grow his beard a little longer and then put a robe around and say, this is our guru, and there would be 10 times more people here. But then the next civilization is not about leaders that people will follow. The next civilization is about, if there are leaders, these are leaders that are among the people and that are inspiring others. It's not based on authority, it's based on common inspiration. So again, we could be far more efficient if we start building gurus. And they are helpful for many things, but they are not helpful for this particular work. And this is why the Theosophical Society was created or organized in this way. So for example, let's go back to the quote. The dawning of a civilization where unity shall be the keynote instead of strife. So if in our relationships, in the lodges, in the centers and all that, we put this as our aim, which it is normally our aim in the Theosophical Society. But if you put it in the context of, in humanity, we know very much how to get into a struggle of power. And it's difficult to cooperate because those aspects of the mental bodies of people and the mental plane, the kind of energies that we need to operate from that point of view, they are still dormant. They don't have vitality. We need to massage the higher mental plane so that vitality comes to it. And the only way to do it is by us trying to operate from that point of view and bring the vitality to that kind of dimension, so that, as we discussed in, I think, the first talk, so that it begins to be available to the whole of humanity. So if we take this in that context and say, okay, how can we resolve the difficulties, the differences, based on unity and not strife? Then she continues, where cooperation shall be the means of life rather than competition. This is also very profound. I mean, when you are doing something, are you doing something with a generous spirit? Are you happy to share? Not to gather for yourself. No, I did this, so I want my name to be there. Or the Theosophical Society. We have done, we believe, so much good in the world. We want the world to recognize us. Hey, we did that. No, what we are trying to do here is different. Can we cooperate and forget about yourself as an organization or as an individual? Now, the challenge is in daily life, because in the Theosophical Society, we act in the same way that we act in our lives. So if in our lives we are self-centered or selfish or materialistic, we will transfer that to our theosophical activity. So we need to work on our own lives to start living in the way that the next civilization will work. So the challenge is, can we work with cooperation and not with competition? Then, where beyond the development of the individual, in the combative intellect, the spiritual unity shall begin to dawn in the eyes and the lives of people. That deeper understanding, closer bonds, more real love between nations that are now apart, shall tread in the wake of the Theosophical movement. So she's saying, this is like a ship. If we can go in that direction, then the external world will follow in the wake of that movement. I mean, she was saying this about ideas at a time where it was very difficult to predict that all these crazy ideas were going to be embraced, and she was right about that. The world moved in the wake of what the TS began to propose, and then other people also worked in significant ways in that direction. So this is the same. If we can set our ship in that direction, then that will inspire other people and other movements that will never refer to the TS. They may never even be inspired directly by the TS on the physical plane, but by everything that is happening on the mental plane. Remember, we talked about that. So if we do this, nations now apart shall tread in the wake of the Theosophical movement and shall bring in due course of time to the earth we live in, a peace which at present lives only in the higher regions of the universe. This is difficult to believe that we can do that we can help the nations that are in constant competition, and even nations that are friends with each other, are always competing and sending spies and trying to take advantage of each other. It's hard to believe that we can contribute to a change in how the nations relate to each other. But, as I mentioned, Besant may be right in what she says here, as she was right in several other things. Now, do you believe that this is possible? We can see something that Leadbeater said, and again, in the TS we don't say that anybody is infallible. Actually, Besant, Leadbeater, Blavatsky, they always said, none of us are infallible. We share what we see, but what we see is always conditioned. The cosmos is complex. Things that we see in one way may change in the future. So, none of this is revelation. But we have enough instances of things that they saw and that they came to fruition. So at least it's not unreasonable to put some stock in what they say. Leadbeater was saying, in the future, people will communicate with some kind of combination of a telephone and a box where there will be images that are sent by the central station, and newspapers won't be much used. The news will come to that kind of box. Maybe he was talking about computers, cell phones, things like that. Anyway, so when Leadbeater was asked about the future of the Theosophical Society, he said, I am supposed to speak to you on this subject of the future of the TS. Now, the first question is, are we speaking of the distant future or the near future? If we are thinking about the distant future, well, I personally have no doubt whatever as to that. The Theosophical Society will certainly continue its work. It will undoubtedly increase very greatly, not in numbers, but I hope in usefulness and influence. I have not the slightest hesitation in prophesying so far as that goes. And Doug this morning read a little of what he was seeing of the future. Now he says, but when you speak of the near future, well, it seems to me that that depends very largely upon ourselves who are members of that society. So basically the principle here is the Mahatmas, they plan things because they work along with the cycles. They plan developments to help, to inspire, to favor certain developments to improve what the process of evolution and growth through cycles will naturally produce. And with their help, the results can be more efficient. If we human beings participate willingly, because there have been examples of many failures simply because we couldn't live up to that. But in general, just as you can predict a toddler will become a teenager will become an adult will become an older person, they can predict certain things in these cycles. So Leadbeater says, this is going to happen no matter what. Now the question is, if you go far enough in the future, the question is, how are we going to get there? Well, that's up to us. We can get there through the Theosophical Society, for example, or through some other means. We can get there by participating in this work, or if we don't, others will come and participate in that work. How we get there depends on us. But that we are going to get there, that is for sure, he says. So, what does he mean? Annie Besant wrote, the inner purpose of the society is to use the members as the pioneers of that forward movement, smoothing that path with their own feet, giving their lives to make it possible, nay, even to make it comparatively easy for those who should follow them. This is an occult principle that seems to be always operating. The spiritual life is easier today for us than it was before because of all the work that previous people did, not only on the physical plane, but the evolution of consciousness that takes place. And, I mentioned in the early days, you could lose your job because of joining the Theosophical Society. Today, there is no danger for the most part in joining the TS. For us, it's far easier to be part of the TS. At a time, at the beginning, it was very difficult. And even beyond that, to join an esoteric group could mean your life. You could be killed. Maybe several of us were killed in some life because we had these crazy ideas. There's a letter where the Master Sinet was complaining, even though he did lost his job as the editor of the Pioneer because he was supporting these ideas. And he was complaining, and the Master says, well, at least be grateful that you suffer in your wallet for this, and you are not suffering with your life, for this cause that you are supporting. So the idea is that there is always a need for some people who, you have a rough path, and that path has to be smoothed, has to be prepared, and somebody has to do it. So the TS is this call. Who wants to do this? Who wants to come and do this work? For Annie Besant continues, as it is the glory of the Theosophical Society to herald the onward movement of the race, the human race, so it is the privilege of its early members to bear something of the burden which shall make that same burden lighter for the race that is to be born. That is its future, secure, inevitable, but yours the choice if you will share that future or not. So besides, all the external purposes of the TS is a selecting mechanism where people are attracted to these ideals and we choose whether we want to work for this or not. You can freely choose, what, I don't want to. My wife Michelle always says, please don't call me again to start a difficult, task of starting a new civilization. Let me sleep in Devachan. Call me when everything is set up. Probably that won't happen, but anyway, that is a possibility. I mean, this is not a question of God judge, you are a bad person. This is a very practical question. What souls want to work on this? What souls we can use for this work? There are many other areas of human development that maybe, a soul that says, no, I don't want to do this, I'm not ready, they can be used in other aspects of human evolution. But the TS is this kind of center to attract many, many souls and sift them out and see what souls are willing and able to participate in this work. And this is what we see in the next quote, if I remember correctly. The work to which we are called is to form a nucleus of souls, at one to show by our lives the unity we proclaim, to live love in a world of hatred, to live peace in a world of strife. That, and nothing less than that, the high mission to which we are called. That, and nothing less than that, the noble duty that is bound upon our shoulders. And just in proportion as we live it, we shall make it possible for others. Just in proportion as our lives are its preachers, will the sermon take effect on the hearts of men. So see what she describes there. It's not really fancy, it's just hard work, because you say, okay, unity versus strife. So this can be, as Juli was saying, mottos in our lives. Can we start consciously practicing when we get to situations, how to solve them through whatever gets as close as possible to unity as opposed to strife? I mean, disagreements will inevitably come up. It's not that nothing should never rock the boat. The question is, how do you respond? Do you go immediately in the combative attitude and try to bully the other into your ways? Or can you try to apply a different strategy? Try to, depending on your own nature, work through affection or work through trying to help people see why this thing that you are proposing may be desirable. Instead of trying to bully each other into doing something. Then the other thing she said, love versus hatred. So here again, there are things in life that upset us. Can we try to learn how to act, even on what is wrong, from the point of view of love? And that doesn't mean be emotional and naive and somebody is killing everybody and say, oh, love the killer and let the person kill, everybody. No, common sense. As we said, occultism is common sense. But for example, Annie Besant was an activist. And she organized the first strike in England and a lot of things like that. But when she talked about activism, she said, in your activism, never try to destroy what is wrong. Because when you act based on hatred of what you think is wrong, even if you win, you have produced more hatred than there was before. So evil always wins. Even if you have a high cause and you get your way, you produce more forces for evil that eventually will undo the results. So she says, always work on the side of love, and that means, in the case of activism, work hard to stimulate the right rather than oppose and fight the wrong. As a general principle, of course, there are times in which situations may come to a point where we like in the world wars, we humanity generated a situation where war was inevitable, and then you have to engage in some way in that situation that evidently is not on the side of love. But then the question is, how do you engage in that? Do you engage in that just killing the people you think are the enemies with no concern for life? Or do you take the far harder road of seeing how we can minimize, death, for example? I don't know, I'm not a politician, I'm using this example because it's quite evident. But this is the idea in your life. Try to see how much can I act from the side of love. And when you fail, then learn from that. I mean, the Buddha, Jesus, they all said the only answer is love. And if you think that they are enlightened beings, then they must be saying something that is practical, that is true. So if you are trying and you fail, then learn from it, because probably you did it in the wrong way, and you will find gradually by trying and failing and examining and trying it again, you will find the right balance. What would it mean to approach this situation with love? Then she said, cooperation versus competition. Again, you have something, you have money or time or intelligence or whatever it is. In our current culture, if you have some skill or some resource, naturally people think, okay, I'll use it to make my life better, to get rich, or to get powerful or influential or whatever it is, and nobody has a second thought. Of course, if you have something, the natural action is to use it to make your life better. But what about using our resources to help others, not just for myself? Then when we are working together, what I was mentioning before, are you working with this sense of ownership, this sense of your individuality, and that this is your work, and you don't want to tell your idea to somebody else because that person may steal your idea, or things like that, which are very common in the academic circles, for example, things like that? Or can we be generous, trusting the law, be more focused on the good that something will produce, and not the source, the apparent source of that good? And then the separative intellect versus unitive spiritual perception. So here again, if we are working on the spiritual life, is to more and more activate or bring into life this aspect of us, of every one of us. So before continuing, let us have a brief discussion. What do you think about this? Any comments, questions?
Thank you, Pablo. I have long been a little puzzled by all the admonitions to work on with nature, consciously cooperate with nature. And I think what that means is that nature is working toward unity and the evolution of consciousness. Is that what that means?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wanted to talk about that, so thank you. When we study the laws of nature, especially the unexplained laws of nature, this is essential for the occultist. Of course, we are not occultists, but this is part of the training we are going through, because the adepts, they work along with the laws of nature. They become agents that help the processes of nature. So if you are going to help in the process of evolution, you need to know where evolution is going. And this is part of what the adepts, they tell us a few things that we have in our books, but this is part of what the adepts attune themselves with the universal mind, and then they get these insights of what the Logos is trying to do. I'm putting it in a more or less anthropomorphic way. But the logos is trying to go in a certain direction. So what is the next step? This is part of what the law of cycles in the Theosophical tradition explain. There was a time, let me say this, what Blavatsky says in The Secret Doctrine. At the beginning of humanity, the souls that were on their own plane, where there is no suffering, there is, unity, harmony, all of that, these souls were called to incarnate in these, to us, ugly bodies of the third root race, and that they were dumb, and the souls had to incarnate to start pushing the bodies to keep developing a mind and become a vehicle for the evolution of the soul. And many souls said, you know what? That's so ugly down there. Here we are cozy. I don't want to go there. And let nature continue to push the bodies, and when they are nicer, then I'm going to go there. They chose to remain spiritual. They avoided to become material. And then the Secret Doctrine says the curse was pronounced. They will be forced to incarnate later and suffer and make others suffer. So when the time came to become more material, that was what is right. And what was wrong is to choose to remain spiritual. But now we are at a different cycle where the souls are so caught with the body that they don't want to let go. So at this point in evolution, what is good is the opposite to what was good at that point. So each cycle requires a specific kind of action to help the logos that is producing this development. So this is why Blavatsky, Bess, and Leadbeater, they are all talking about what's the next cycle, because that's what the logos wants to produce. And we can become agents to accelerate that development so that it can be made as efficient as possible. And for that reason is that we need to know the laws of nature. Again, at this point, we are beginners, but eventually that's how the adepts help the logos. They know the laws of nature and how to become agents and co-workers of nature. That's the idea.
The question that I've been wondering about is about the next subrace, right? Mm-hmm. So we're supposed to be laying the groundwork for it. So more specifically, can we go into how do we do that? Are we putting stuff in the astral light? Are we putting stuff on the mental plane? Are we leaving books and education, changing people on the physical plane? How would you explain the work we should do?
Yeah, I think, the way I see it is all that the TS is doing or is supposed to be doing, all of that is to present these ideas in front of humanity, is to help people start, relating to these ideas, applying these ideas. But then we individually are the ones that need to start transforming that. So when I say this you can take this as the recipe to help the sixth subrace, because this is how we are in the Kali Yuga, the Dark Ages. And we had in Crotona a Secret Doctrine forum, and Michel was presenting the idea that the TS is a kind of bubble of Satya Yuga, of the Golden Age, within the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age. Because what we are trying to do is to generate a place where we try to live in the way that people will live in the Golden Age. So this is how people will live, or it's not that everybody will be like this, but this will be the ideals. Just as the example that I keep bringing up this weekend, this idea of we need to protect the animals. Now it became for many people something that we all agree. There are people who are still selfish, who are still, maybe aggressive with animals and all that, but our culture recognizes, or part of our culture recognizes, of course we need to be kind to animals. So the idea is that during the sixth subrace, our culture will say, of course, unity and cooperation is the way to go. And there is a quote where Annie Besant says, when they look back to all our competition and all of that, they will think of us as barbarians that work through conflict and competition and all of that. So we need to produce the transformation within us that will allow more and more people to tap into it and start working in that way. So this is the recipe. It's not very fancy, it's quite pedestrian, but it is super difficult.
So the fact that we need a recipe is sort of a very fifth sub-race approach. And the fourth goal or thing says maybe the approach shouldn't be recipe-ish. It should be more intuitive and more relying more on seeing the whole as opposed to the parts.
Yeah, because this is a recipe for people who are not there yet. This is a recipe for us, fifth sub-race, to move in that direction. As you move in that direction, then the spiritual perception, replaces all of that. But this is what we are. I mean, individually, we may be at different places, but basically, this is what we are. They are asking, fifth sub-race people, can you start working in this direction? This is, how you can, it's like when the teacher talks to a child, you talk to the child with the language of the child and hope that the child grows and then transcends that language. So yeah, this is that. Okay, let's move on a little then. So again, Besant talked quite a bit about this. Leadbeater also, but Leadbeater focused more on describing how he saw that little pamphlet that is a chapter in the book that Doug mentioned, the beginning of the sixth root race, is fascinating. I mean, how things happen so far in the future may be quite different, but take the principles there. One of the things he says is that the weather will change. Now, we are not talking about 700 years. This is for the sixth sub-race within our fifth root race cycle. But then we go through the sixth sub-race, the seventh sub-race, and then the sixth root race begins. And we don't know exactly how long that will be in the future, but thousands of years. Now, at that time, that's what also Doug said, that I think it was you, that the west part of the US, so you know that there is this circle of fire that is called, I think, all these volcanoes, the Ring of Fire, and you have the St. Andrea fault. What Blavatsky and Besant were saying is that all the land under the Pacific, from Australia and New Zealand to the west part of California, all that will come up, and then the east part of what is the US and America will go down. So, I live in California, and with my wife, we are trying to see exactly where, so we purchase land, and then in a few thousand years, we have a front beach house, right there. So, everybody says, California will go down because of the, and I say, guess what? It's the opposite. So come to California, Anyway, so the weather will be different also. And Leadbeater says houses will have almost no walls. I say, privacy. How can we live with no walls in the houses? And when I go to Adyar, there is the dining hall there, and it's without walls. And in India, you see, in some cases, you see something that is more out there in nature. So Leadbeater says there will not be walls and some very interesting things. But anyway, so that's the sixth root race. But the process of getting there, the first thing that needs to happen is that inner transformation. And what Besant and Blavatsky and Leadbeater and this Theosophical leader says, that is the inner plan of the TS. All these three objects, knowledge, lectures, all the activities we do, is just the external part. What the masters are trying to do is this. And they are using the TS in that sense. And the TS and whatever other organization fit themselves for what they need. So It is not you as you are right now who will make the future, but you as you shall be, self-created from your aspirations now. And just in proportion as each of you nourishes those aspirations and cherishes those ideals and tries, however feebly, to work them out amid the limitations of your past, which cramps your present life, so just as you try that, so far will you, in the interval between death and birth, make the nobler faculties which shall qualify you to be born in the sixth subrace upon earth. That should be your keynote in your lives now, that the inspiring motive, the controlling power. So basically, when talking about karma, Besan many times would say, what you do now is not what you are right now. Because right now, you are limited by the past. So what you do now is, as she says here, this, the limitations of your past which cramps your present life. So suppose you never develop muscles, physical muscles. And then the task is to lift something that is very heavy. So if you try to lift it, you won't be able to because you don't have enough muscles. It's not that, so you try and you fail. And you say, oh, I am such a bad lifter. I just cannot do this, I'm bad at this. But somebody that knows about muscles would say, obviously you cannot do it. You don't have the muscles. However, by trying and trying and trying, you start developing the muscles. And eventually, you get the muscles to lift this. So it's not that you cannot lift it because you are bad. You cannot lift it because you didn't create the conditions. But the conditions are created by the trying. So when you try to work through love and cooperation and all of that, you may fail, but not because you are bad. You may fail because you, I, us, have not developed those skills in the past. So Annie Besant says, don't worry about failures. You are not what you do. You are what you are intending to do. Because that is your real present. You intend to do right, and you do wrong because of the limitations of the past. But your real intention, not say, oh, I had the intention to help you, sorry. Your real intention, what you are trying to do, she says, will be your present, your reality in the future. So, because in the interval between life and death, you develop those abilities that you try to express in your life. So basically what she's saying is, take all these ideas, aspire to them, love them, try to embody them. Don't worry if you fail. All that true love, if it is true love, will develop during the interval, and in your next life, you will be able to do it. You will come with the muscles that you need to do that. And this is why all these ideas are presented to us, because we need to consciously follow them. If we feel called to it, we need to consciously follow them, because that's how we develop the ability to do it. So let me show you a couple more quotes, and then we can go into the discussion again. Now, Leadbeater said, those who join this effort will have to incarnate over and over again in rapid succession in the new race, trying each time to bring their various bodies nearer and nearer to the model set before them by the Manu. The Manu is one of these adepts who is in charge of guiding the social and cultural development of humanity on the physical plane. So you see that he says, the idea is that those people who say, okay, this is something that will take centuries, until the sixth sub-race is established in humanity, will take many and many incarnations. But Leadbeater says those who want to participate in this will incarnate in succession without much of an interval, And then in each lifetime, you put pressure on yourself to align yourself with the ideal. So you can start in this lifetime. This is what we are talking about. It's hard to respond to difficulties not through strife but through unity. It's really hard. And that is the pressure that you are applying on yourself to accelerate that evolution. If you don't apply any pressure, most people are not applying any pressure, and they will evolve to that point. But it will take many, even a few million years. This is where the idea of rounds and chains come into place in the Theosophical view. If you want to help people, because the problem is you say, okay, then why make an effort? It will take a few million years. Yeah, but do you like the path to get there? I mean, see all the conflict and suffering in the world. Imagine, okay, you will take a few million years of this, very frustrating kind of existence until gradually you will develop all of that. The masters say, no, let us do all we can so that they go through, humanity goes through this difficult period as fast as possible. So you can help in that. You have the freedom to say, okay, I'm going to apply extra pressure in myself to get closer to those ideals. And in doing so, you are helping the whole of humanity. So let me read again from the beginning. Those who join this effort will have to incarnate over and over again in rapid succession in the new race, trying each time to bring their various bodies nearer and nearer to the model set before them by the Manu, a very laborious and trying piece of work, but one that is absolutely necessary for the establishment of the new type of humanity, which is required for the race. The opportunity of volunteering for this work is now open to us. I mean, unfortunately, the language can be completely misunderstood. When we say race, we are not talking about any ethnic group in particular, the new type of humanity. This is not, what the Nazis were trying to do, manipulate genetic. It's a new type of humanity at the level of consciousness, of how we act. So the opportunity of volunteering for that work is now open to us. This is the call that the Theosophical Society is putting out there. And the last quote. So Bani Besant says, the Theosophical Society among these movements of the day must hold up firmly a true ideal. It is the function of the prophet, of the spiritual teacher, to uphold the ideal and point ever towards it, so that individuals may have it ever before their eyes and choose the roads which lead in the right direction. This, to me, is the most challenging thing, because many times we look at what successful organizations are doing in the world and try to copy that. Of course, that's a good policy. I mean, we can learn from those who are doing good things. But we need to do it with discernment, because yes, perhaps we can be more successful by, some of the examples that I gave, by creating authorities, by narrowing our work so that it's very easy and everybody does the same, or in ways that depart us from the mission that we have. We know how effective in the world is to be, for those who are conducting an organization or in front of a team or something, to be heartless, to be, to push people, to try to get the best out of them, because the world is a machinery that uses people as parts of the machinery, and when they break, then you replace them. The world doesn't care about that. So sometimes we may say, in the society we should be more efficient, and we may be tempted to take on some of those ways of working. But what we should be doing is the opposite. We should not be copying the world should be copying us. We need to be inspiring the world how to do things in a different way. And again, don't take this in an arrogant sense. We need the humility of wisdom to learn from everything that is valuable, but basically, we need to understand what our mission is and inspire the world to follow us and not the opposite. So here are some of the, this pair of opposites that you see often when there are writings about the next civilization. So separation for the fifth subrace and unity, selfishness, altruism, individualism, brotherhood, competition, cooperation, knowledge, wisdom, dogmatism, openness. This is part of the mission, I think, of our organization, that is not just at the level of concepts, but is can we embody all those virtues, and in that way we are not only making ourselves fit for this, but also helping the world be fit for the dawning of the new civilization. All right, any comments or questions before we close?
While we're trying to imagine the sixth subrace, maybe we could use art in some way to project this ideal, even though we can't embody it yet, and it may inspire us to embody it as well.
Did you say art?
Art.
Yeah.
Like a
Certainly.
movie. Or
Oh, sure. I mean, Blavatsky wrote a series of nightmare tales, and it is known that the adepts many times inspired writers, and because that's a way to reach the humanity that will not come and tell us, give me a philosophical essay that I want to study what you do. So yeah, that's part of the work.
I just want to comment again on the Nazi movement. They want to make the master race, and then we have our objective too. That's all.
Yeah. Now, for example, when Blavatsky, I remembered off top of my head 3 sources. I'm sure there are more. When Blavatsky, the Countess Weichmeister, who was a quite interesting person, she was clairvoyant also, and she helped Blavatsky for many years. And she came to the US to lecture. She was from Europe. And then I remember Besant. All of them said that one of the points where this new civilization was beginning to show was in California, they say specifically. And they said one of the reasons is because of the melting of so many races, ethnicities, that are going on now. So the idea of even from the anthropological point of view, the theosophical idea of evolution of races is not by purity of race that actually leads to stagnation. It's by this melting pot, and we have it in several of our writings. So, I don't think we can take seriously anything that the Nazis said in the sense of an esoteric teaching, because they misunderstood everything. The word Aryanism, the swastika, the runes, the idea of a race, they misunderstood everything. So we can't take, there were some there, and Richard, you hear, Richard knows also quite a bit about this, and there were some people, as I mentioned the first day, that were interested in occultism, but the way they interpreted things, at least from the Theosophical tradition, is completely wrong.
Pablo, I would just suggest that also just a modern understanding of genetics supports the fact that the mingling of the variety of races results in much better genetic pool and better results rather than the purity of a race.
Yeah, that's called endogamia, or in English, endogamy. And that, so when you try to produce that purity, that leads to illness and genetic defects. Nature shows you very clearly, no, that's not the way to go.
I would also just add to that that the 1,000-year Reich they were talking about, for all they said, turned out to be 12.
Yeah, yeah, of course. But you know, when Blavatsky many people would complain to Blavatsky why many things were kept secret, because Blavatsky would say, I cannot talk about this, no, this we cannot go into. And you know, the fifth root ray or sub-race intellect would say, wait, why are you telling me that I cannot have certain information? Give me the information, don't retain the information, and then I'll work with it. And Blavatsky kept saying, well, that's not how it works, because we know that humanity is going to misuse it. So they knew that a lot of these esoteric teachings were going to be exploited in the opposite way to what they are meant. And this is something that the adepts have to, I mean, it's a byproduct or a side effect that they know they have to take on. I mean, they try to minimize the possibility of these side effects, but it's inevitable. So if they give esoteric teachings, can benefit a lot of people, there will be people that will use it in the opposite way. That's a given.